He has watched a billion nights, and still this one gnaws at him. A world where fear itself condenses into predators that feed on the human soul. He chooses to enter that world not to rule it, but to measure it against humanity's last hope. He arrays equations in light across the Golden Throne, warps the webway's angle by a single heretical fraction, and anchors a shard of himself. The cost is clear. Extra candles to the Astronomicon, extra voices ending in his name. The breach opens above Shibuya Station, and the city hears a choir burn through the rain. A pressure wave rolls over neon and vinyl banners. Umbrellas flip inside out. The sky looks split by a blade and the seam glows hot, then widens, a vertical noon stitched into midnight. Phones rise like a forest of glass as strangers push each other back, saying the same new word in Japanese, English, anything with breath, angel. He steps through, distant and near at once, a man-shaped radiance in warplate that is more prayer than metal. Gold flows across a body that should be crushed by ages, yet moves like the first soldier did. His eyes are suns buried under ice, gauging a city that hums with trains and shame and affection and hunger. He hears all of it. He has watched a billion nights, and still this one gnaws at him. A world where fear itself condenses into predators that feed on the human soul. He chooses to enter that world not to rule it, but to measure it against humanity's last hope. He arrays equations in light across the Golden Throne, warps the webway's angle by a single heretical fraction, and anchors a shard of himself. The cost is clear. Extra candles to the Astronomicon, extra voices ending in his name. The breach opens above Shibuya Station, and the city hears a choir burn through the rain. A pressure wave rolls over neon and vinyl banners. Umbrellas flip inside out. The sky looks split by a blade and the seam glows hot, then widens, a vertical noon stitched into midnight. Phones rise like a forest of glass as strangers push each other back, saying the same new word in Japanese, English, anything with breath, angel. He steps through, distant and near at once, a man-shaped radiance in warplate that is more prayer than metal. Gold flows across a body that should be crushed by ages, yet moves like the first soldier did. His eyes are suns buried under ice, gauging a city that hums with trains and shame and affection and hunger. He hears all of it. The voices are data and devotion. A paramedic kneels by a woman who has fainted and says, "Steady, steady." A salaryman thinks, "Not another subway delay," and then wonders if he will call his mother tonight. A child holds a paper fox mask and decides she likes this new god more than fireworks. Heat signatures ripple behind glass and concrete, not human. Something presses back against his aura and recoils as if shocked. He feels a pressure like static under skin. The air has teeth. It tastes like the warp-learned self-control. Curtains drop. Shimmering planes of sorcery cinch down around blocks of Shibuya like dark sacks. They fall with the sound of rain on canvas. Civilians stare at them and see nothing but mist. Those with training see the lattice, the knots, the signatures. The Emperor sees a diagram of human despair tension between anchors. Ichichi, confirm 3 circles. A calm woman's voice says over a small earpiece in a white van idling near Mayashita Park. Kiyotaka Ichichi adjusts his glasses and looks at his monitors. He's a coordinator for Tokyo Jujutsu High. Stress lives in permanent pinch lines around his mouth. 8 feeds are dead. 3 show static. 1 shows a silhouette in impossible light. Confirmed, he answers. Unknown entity above Shibuya Station. High-grade manifestation, or something else. Alert level, special. Paging Gojo-sensei. Gojo Satoru walks out of an alley, with a convenience store bag and an expression like boredom dressed as a smile. His infinity folds space into a joke around him. He tilts his head as the pressure changes, and blue eyes gleam behind his blindfold. He says to nobody, and then to Ichichi. That's new. Keep the kids out. On the main concourse, a young man with curly hair and tired eyes grips a shopping basket to his chest. Yuji Itadori is not with Megumi and Nobara tonight. He tells himself he is only here to buy energy drinks, but his legs already know where the stairs are. In his chest, a second heartbeat wakes and laughs without humor. The Emperor lands without touching the concrete. His presence displaces dust and fear. The first curse lunges, a thing like a lamprey made of robber's rope and rot, slick with resentments. It hits a wall of pressure that is not a wall. It crumples, as if it forgot its own shape. He should not reveal too much yet. He must test the field. His right hand opens. A soft glow leaves his palm and spreads like dawn fog. Pedestrians blink and take the first steps backward as their nervous systems flip from panic to obedience. Evacuate, he says. And the word is a vector. It finds the right muscles in human bodies and moves them into routes that are safe. He maps the station's guts in a heartbeat. Stairs, platforms, choke points, and overlays the map with lines of kindness. The weak and the old go first. The children do not let go of their masks. The first visible cost comes with the next breath. He feels a distant flicker at the edge of his awareness, as if a star somewhere stuttered. A choir of psychers across an impossible distance sings a note higher to feed this act. He holds the line and accepts the debt. Curses converge. They are moths to a candle that hates moths. Volcanic heat rolls in from the street. The pavement steams without rain. A figure like a charcoal statue strides through the curtain, head crowned with a carbonized sun. Yogo's footfalls print glass in tar. His eye light narrows. God, Jogo hisses, teeth clicking like cooling stones. No, something worse. You stink of men. The Emperor turns his head. His gaze favors nothing over nothing, yet Jogo flinches. The curse of volcanoes throws a fist. The air around the blow ripples, heavy with cursed energy, the flavor of extinction fantasies. The Emperor absorbs it with an open palm and feels the shape of the technique. Hatred, harnessed. He feeds it into a circuit and vents it upward. A column of flame and vapor becomes a harmless aurora. A man in a fire captain's jacket stops dead in the street below and stares upward, radio pressed to his ear. He cannot see what is happening exactly, but he can see the aurora twisting where the rain should be. His daughter is somewhere inside the station. He says a name to his radio and then says another name. And then he says, God help us, as if he is ashamed, but also very practical. 2 blocks away, a woman in a Miko outfit leads tourists into a side street that is not under a curtain. She thinks it is silly to wear the costume, and also that it makes her brave. When the golden figure looks her way, delight surges through her, embarrassing and real. She bows because that is what you do when something high meets you halfway. Gojo appears on the platform like a rumor with legs. He does not blur. He simply is now here. He drinks in the light of the golden arrival and grins. You're not one of ours, he says, voice bright and lazy, which is how he hides his worry. Tokyo's already crowded tonight. Your city is in a test, the Emperor says. His voice is iron heated and quenched and heated again. I will hold the floors for a time. Do what you came to do, sorcerer. Oh, Gojo says, and the grin thins into something more like readiness. I like you. Jogo roars, and the station geometry distorts under heat stress. A domain swells like a bubble that refuses to pop. The Emperor feels the attempt to create an inside that excludes him. He has seen this move on 1,000 planes, quantum sanctums, Psylocked bubbles, false heavens built by tyrants. He does not let it finish. He triggers a tiny sun inside the forming sphere and collapses it while it is still a suggestion. The implosion knocks Jogo backward and drops tiles like sleet. Curses hiss at the wounds in their logic. Codex note: the projection uses lattice-locked psychic pressure, an aurimetric scaffold that converts hostile fieldwork into inert vector noise. Sustained use increases astronomican draw by measurable quanta. Ichichi watches his monitors bloom with static and then snap back. Gojo-sensei, unknown entity just neutralized a half-formed domain. That shouldn't be possible. Sure it is, Gojo says, cheerful and horrible. You just need to be better than everyone. He might be, which is rude. On street level, the Emperor shepherds a flood of civilians through choke points. He catches a falling train car with one hand and a thought. Screams cut short in relief as steel grinding silences itself mid-crush. He rotates the car, sets it down aligned with a gap in the platform like a magician rethreading a stitch. He does not talk when he does this. His mind is 3 cities wide. One portion studies the field energy. It is not the warp, but it rhymes. It is made of belief's bruise. It rewards fear, but its practitioners have learned to account for that. This is valuable. He files it in a drawer labeled possible scalpel. He senses the knot in the center of the curtain system. A face with stitches smiles in 1,000 places at once. Kenjaku is not here with his body, but the world within the world bears his smug stamp. The Emperor recognizes the ambition at a glance. Squeeze the strongest sorcerer into a box, and then trigger a cascade. Remove blue infinity and see what else falls. Prison realm incoming, Gojo says, joking to keep the air thin, and then he's gone, moving without moving, toward the point where a human-shaped problem will become a box-shaped crisis. The Emperor does not follow. He will not stop every disaster tonight. He feels the pull of his throne like a gravity well. Already, too many souls feed him. Already, the candlelight on Terra flickers starved. He prioritizes. A slab of rebar and concrete pitches toward a group of teenagers at the scramble crossing. He reaches without reaching and unweighs the slab. It drifts sideways and becomes a couch for the next second before settling gentle. "Thank you," a boy yells, and then claps his hand over his mouth, appalled at the smallness of the phrase. The Emperor looks at him only long enough for the boy to feel seen as significant. A sharp-fingered curse scuttles along the ceiling and drops, serrated limbs chattering. The Emperor lets it cut his left forearm. The cut burns with a taste. Old classroom humiliations, late rent, the itch of someone else's success. He catalogues the chemistry of the sting. He bleeds gold that steams like myrrh, and the curse tries to drink it and convulses. "Do not touch him," says a woman's voice behind him, crisp and angry. Utahime Iori stands with hair half undone, dressed for a festival and for work. She draws a blade and cuts the curse's head off with one clean draw. She is not the strongest sorcerer, but she is a professional. She does not waste motion. "You're the unknown," she says, looking him up then down, and choosing to be unimpressed even as her skin prickles. "I don't like unknowns. I do not like paying what must be paid," he answers. "But I do. Your students will die if we talk too long. Direct me." Utahime hesitates for the space of one heartbeat, and then accepts an order because she is not proud when pride wastes lives. "Ichichi, reroute evac through the north stairs." She snaps into her phone. "You..." She looks at him and almost laughs because how do you gesture at a being that eats adjectives? Stop those things from splitting civilians off from our corridors. And if you see Mahito, you don't let him touch anyone's soul. "Defined," the Emperor says. And with that one word, he understands something fresh, soul-shaping, contact-mediated, technique anchored in the idea that people are lumps of clay, revolting and useful. A child cries for her mother near a stairwell. A streak of shadow moves toward her, extending a hand with too many knuckles. The Emperor is there in a step he does not take. His hand closes around the curse's wrist. For one instant, Mahito's face ripples into clarity across 3 hallways at once. Curious, Mahito purrs from 2 meters away, and 2 universes close, both true. Another toy. He steps toward a salaryman and touches his shoulder. The salaryman's body bulges and flowers into unlived versions. Fat, thin, elderly, infant, churning under skin. The Emperor releases the wrist he holds and clamps 2 fingers in the air. The distortion halts and collapses back with a painful snap. The salaryman falls to his knees, vomits, then breathes. Mahito licks his teeth. "You move souls," he says, delighted. "I move souls. Let's..." The Emperor's gaze falls upon him. Not like a blow, but like a diagnosis. "Do not," the Emperor says, and Mahito laughs like a toddler with a knife. The next pulse of the night hits all at once. Jogo hurls a firestorm that scatters like birds against the Emperor's invisible bastions. Gojo walks into a square that should not exist, looks at a cube that should not open, and says a line like a punchline the station may remember for centuries. The world holds its breath as a lid shuts, and a god of the local scale becomes a name in past tense. The Emperor feels the closure through the field like a pressure change. He knows a trap when he hears the door click. He calculates 24 possibilities, accepts that 17 require unacceptable drain, and chooses 3 that preserve the most. Nanami Kento arrives with sleeves rolled and a tie that should have an office's smell, but carries blood instead. He takes in the scene without drama. "Unknown ally," he says. "You're on our side." "For now," the Emperor says, because he does not lie, and also because he knows that truth makes good colleagues work faster. "Good enough," Nanami replies, and plants his foot like a stamp as he shifts his ratio and carves a curse in a line so clean it looks like a diagram. Gakukanji. Your Shinobu's people arrive late because they always arrive late, and then claim to have been early in principle. The old man's eyes weigh the Emperor and find only blasphemy. He says words like protocol and sanction and secure. He orders 3 lower-grade sorcerers with rigid backs to take positions, as if they could reposition a sunrise with sternness. This entity classifies as an external special grade. A council proxy reports over wire, voice with the thin sneer of someone who likes paperwork more than people. Priority is containment after the current incident. Authorize lethal force if manageable. Utahime says, "Stuff your orders," because her filter burned out years ago. Nanami says nothing that could be recorded and used against anyone. Ichichi looks sick, but keeps directing evac. The Emperor hears Kenjaku's humor in the placement of this human friction. Of course, force allies to split attention. Make them guard against each other while your real play runs. He fixes a fresh map in his head. He marks living cities with light, dead corridors with shadow, and Kenjaku with a line that runs like a surgical stitch across futures. He picks one node, a subterranean bomb of despair that will detonate if a certain number of screams align. He goes there. The corridor is low and the air is old. Water rips its knuckles along concrete. A curse with a face like a broken clock drags a chain of faces behind it, crying in time. The Emperor touches his chain and the faces become air. He breaks the body with a thought. He opens a service door without his hand. He finds the nest. They are seeding the station with grief. It is architecture. The ritual wants a threshold number of endings. He feels a sick admiration for Kenjaku's engineering mind. He stands in the center of the nest and breathes. His aura folds into a tight sphere, The field inside it changes not in volume, but in grammar. Where the curse energy reads as fear mathematics, it momentarily reads as responsibility calculus. The system hiccups. The ritual's counters blink error. This act costs 2. The light backbone of his projection strains. A hairline crack opens at a shoulder seam. Pain is information. He logs it and continues long enough to break 3 load-bearing runes. The station doesn't sigh in relief because this station does not know how to sigh, but some future screams do not get to happen. He returns to the concourse. The air has thickened with iron and night. Blood dries on tile. Jogo burns alone now without his partner's calm. Mahito is everywhere and nowhere. Chozo stands with his eyes hollow, torn between family and command. He stares at Yuji like a tide stares at a moon. Yuji stares back, and inside him, Sukuna opens a lazy eye with the contempt of a king roused from ugly sleep. "You," Sukuna says without moving a lip, staring through Yuji's skin at the Emperor with interest like a knife balanced on a fingertip. Finally, an appetite. The Emperor meets that look and files it under later, with a skull next to the word. He gestures, and railings rise from the floor as if the building has remembered hands. The new bars form funnels that guide people away from the worst corners. Civilians flow like water obeying a more honest gravity. A little girl in a fox mask looks up again. She waves, he nods. "Is this salvation?" Gakuganji demands, standing with a staff that is also a guitar because old men are allowed to be strange. "Or invasion? This is a human war." "It is," the Emperor says. He looks at the old man and measures him as he would measure a fortress that has never been taken, because nobody wanted it enough. "That is why I am here." "What's the catch?" Nanami asks quietly, standing too close because he knows the value of proximity. "There's always a price." "I require energy to persist," the Emperor answers simply. "In my world, that cost is paid in lives already doomed and in light bent across a galaxy. Here, I will not feed on your pain. I will hold as long as I can, and then I will withdraw." "Acceptable," Nanami says, "because there is no perfect in this job. Only choices you can defend when you look at yourself." "Unacceptable," Gakuganji says, "because there is no perfect in his job either. Only rules that keep him from admitting he is afraid." Mahito claps slowly from the ceiling, upside down, as if the world is a toy he hangs from. "Everyone is so serious," he purrs. "Let's make something funny." He drops toward a cluster of evacuees like a falling star with teeth. The Emperor moves and is simply there, between teeth and throats. Mahito's hand touches his gauntlet. The gauntlet is reality's stubbornness made physical. Mahito recoils with a delighted trill. He reaches for a child's ankle instead and finds his wrist locked in air again as if a judge wrote "no" in the space around him. "You can't rewrite him," Yuji says through his teeth, unsure who he is telling but telling someone. "I can rewrite you," Mahito croons. And then Yuji is moving because he must. Because action is the only language he knows how to speak when someone wants to break someone else into pieces to think about later. The Emperor does not stop him. He does not pull rank in a world he has just walked into. He deflects 2 more curses with invisible planes that hum faintly like a cathedral's throat. He reroutes panic into cues. He keeps 1,000 tiny promises to strangers in less than a minute. Outside, sirens weep and tires hiss. Police officers put up tape across nothing in particular because it makes people obey better. A city employee from the Shibuya ward office organizes bottled water distribution with the stubborn dignity of a clerk at war. Utahime drags a curse by its hair and stabs it into stillness. "I hate these nights," she tells the Emperor, "because talking makes action stick sometimes. They ruin everything. They reveal everything, he says, and she hates that he is right, in a way that comforts nobody. The curtain flickers. Kenjaku adjusts the parameters with a fingertip movement performed far away. He grins into a camera nobody sees. Add pressure, he says to no one in particular, and the universe obeys the smile of an idea. The next wave comes smarter. Domain fragments like surgical tents pop up, not full expansions, just partials like testing balloons. Their edges bite into the Emperor's aura with data-hungry lips. He relearns how to hold in this ecology, places counter-pressure at angles the domains cannot solve for without tearing. He breaks 2 and ignores 3, and walks around 1 that is trying to be clever and be everywhere. The builder of that one sulks. Gojo is gone. The absence changes the texture of the night in a way that every sorcerer can taste. Fear tries a coup. Duty arrests it, with a warrant signed by training. Nanami's breathing roughens. He is a man who hates lies, and tonight is made of them. Children are shepherded. Old women are carried. Men who did not think of themselves as brave are drafted by a look and serve nobly for 5 minutes. Jogo gathers heat in a sphere the size of a trolley and compresses it until the air screams. He throws it. The Emperor catches it on a spread of fingers. The heat eats at the edges of his projection and tastes golden marrow. He feeds the ball to a nearby cloud like a morsel, and it becomes rain again. The rain hisses against hot stone and smells like pennies and ozone. You are not a god, Jogo says, voice shaking, because he believes in gods, and he hates them like he hates anything higher, but he loves them too, because cinders love flame. I am the man who refused to die when men needed a lighthouse, the Emperor says, which is truer than titles. Jogo laughs, broken and pure. Then burn. He burns. The Emperor allows the wave to pass through him like a ghost through a classroom. It erases flaws behind him, then remembers what it is to be a wave, and disperses. The Emperor looks down at his left forearm. The earlier cut continues to smoke with a bitterness that does not belong to physics. The skin there resists closing, as if the wound remembers other shapes. He lays 2 fingers on it. The glow seals into a pale scar that refuses to look entirely like his. He keeps it. He tests his own limits in the next minute, not out of vanity, but because he must know the shape of his cage. He pushes his aura against the curtain's seam and feels it give as a tooth gives under a dentist's tool. He could tear it all now and let everything out and in. The cost would be paid not just by him, but by any small mind within reach of the sudden pressure shift. He does not do it. He focuses instead on the quiet math of saving crowds. He picks 3 locations where bottlenecks will break psyches. He opens doors with a thought. He sends warmth into lungs to keep a panic attack from becoming a heart attack. He puts his body where debris will fall so that it falls on patients instead of skulls. In the van, Ijichi whispers, "Thank you," to the screen without meaning to. He notes times and positions and thinks about writing a supplemental report that will make no sense to anyone who did not feel this night touch their bones. He wonders if this is what it feels like to be a civilian during a sorcerer fight, and decides to be kinder to the next person who yells at him for moving a car. Gakuganji gathers his people. "Prepare a 4-directional formation," he says. "We will test this entity. If it resists containment, we try that, and I will resign tonight and punch you tomorrow," Utahime says, hair falling out of its tie, and 2 junior sorcerers stare at her like she did something truly brave, which she did. "You would defy the council," Gakuganji demands, outraged that anyone recognizes his lack of authority. "Yes," Nanami says, voice flat as a stamp again, "because sometimes life is merciful in its simplicity." The emperor does not smile. He cannot spare the muscle memory for it. He says to Gakuganji without looking, "If you must test me, choose the test that helps your people, or stand aside." Mahito leans against a pillar, hands in pockets, attention drifting like a cat's. "He'll break," he sings softly. "They all do. Human gods are the saddest toys." "Your noise," Yuji says, and punches him. It is a poor plan and a good act. Mahito's body yields and reforms. His smile splits and reseals. He preens and looks offended. The emperor watches the fight with one eye and blocks 3 other murders with the rest of himself. Choso steps into the middle of the concourse with blood orbiting him like tiny moons. He looks at Yuji and at the emperor. His voice is a low, old thing that comes from a place where brothers are a promise and a problem. "Choose," he says, perhaps to himself. Then he chooses. Blood arcs knife bright. The emperor sees the technique's purity. Physics married to vow, and nods once, because respect must be paid even on nights like this. Far below, hidden by 20 meters of concrete and 20 years of arrogance, an engine whines. The ritual wants attention. It wants to matter. It wants to leave a scar. The emperor sends a thin thread of himself downward, a trickle of will like a string on a kite. He puts a finger on the engine's throat and says, "Not yet." The finger trembles. 1,000 light years away, human lives brighten and go out on purpose. He hears them the way he hears his own breath. He wants to stop hearing that. He cannot. He never could. He is very tired for a thing made of duty and fire. A siren bleeds into silence. Rain starts again, and then stops again, as Yogo argues with clouds. A train glides into a station with nobody driving it, and stops perfectly, because miracles love competence. Kenjaku's smile widens wherever it is. "This changes the experiment," he says, pleased in the way only a scientist with a god complex can be when the world hands him a new variable. He orders the smarter move now. Retreat where strength is softest. Push where structure is most brittle. And seed the night with a question. He releases a word in the curse network that is not a word but a tug, and many things answer. Blades that appear from nowhere, mouths that open in stairwells, old grudges finding legs. The emperor registers the pattern and rolls with it, adjusting directs like a general who is also a dam. A girl trips and her fox mask skids, and she starts to cry. The useless crying of a child whose entire day has become a lesson. The emperor's hand picks up the mask. He kneels and sets it in her hands. The action is small. It will be remembered like a temple. "Go," he says, and her mother says, "Thank you." And Utahime says, "Move." And Nanami says, "Left." And Ijichi says, "Stairs clear." And Gakuganji grinds his teeth. The concourse empties faster now because the shape of the room has been changed by courage repeated. In the quieter spaces, violence becomes more precise. Mahito laughs less and thinks more. Gyogo smolders and sulks. Chozo's blood sings names. Yuji's hands shake when they are not fists. The emperor looks up. The curtain is a diagram made by a mind that appreciates symmetry. He picks 2 weak places and presses until they squeal. Air from outside blows in with a new smell, exhaust and hope. He holds the gap and does not let it close for 60 heartbeats. 200 people pass through. He releases it and watches it knit like skin. His projection flickers for the first time in a way that non-sorcerers can see. The golden edge of him fuzzes, then steadies. A rumor becomes a story, becomes a belief. Somebody whispers that he is a guardian kami. Somebody else jokes, terrified, that he is Osha with a sword. He feels the city start to believe in him in the small, efficient way cities believe, by adjusting their flows to his presence. It is power. It is temptation. He puts it down like a drink he will not have. He walks through the station like a slow line grounded in war. He holds up a slab and holds down panic. He touches a man's shoulder as he passes, and the man stops hyperventilating. He says 5 words and a police officer remembers all his training and none of his fear. He touches a building and it remembers how to be a building. He does not save everyone. He cannot. A cursed blade slips past a shield and opens a throat that wanted to sing next week. A crushed hand will never unclench. He feels each one. He does not stop to mourn now. He writes the names where private gods go to keep him honest. Outside the station, the holiday becomes a refugee camp. A hot dog stand serves tea. A DJ sets down a speaker and says, "My generator," and it becomes a charging station. The emperor does not do these things. People do. He notices and grants them the dignity of a witness. Gakuganji raises his staff, and the air hums as a formation locks around the emperor like a polite cage. "If you will not be contained, be tested," he announces. His face is stone with the words carved in. "If you are ally, prove terms. If enemy, yield." The emperor stops. He turns. He lets them place the poles. He lets the formation hum. He does not resist. "For your sake," he says to the old man, voice soft enough to be remembered later, "I will allow this theatre." The poles bite. The formation analyzes. It tastes his field and chokes. It seeks to compress him into a category that exists in the council's book. He lets it succeed for 3 breaths. On the 4th, he releases a pulse not of force, but of information. "I am not a curse, and I am not a god of your type, and I am not here to own you." The formation decides its budget software cannot handle the audit and powers down without blowing up. Gakuganji stares. He is too honest not to. He lowers his staff a fraction. Utahime says nothing, because sometimes mercy is not making the joke you have earned. Nanami watches and files it under the night the old man learned something and did not die of it, which he does not have time to enjoy. Kenjaku's last pressure of the axe taps the station's bones. A sound begins that is not in the audible range, but flirts with it. Dogs in nearby apartments start to whine. People rub their eyes and say they taste metal. The emperor looks down and sees the engine again, trying to become an event. He descends like a slow pillar in a lift that is a shaft of obedience. The walls whisper in old posters and new mildew. The chamber is a cylinder with cables like roots. Symbols sit in chalk and ash on the floor. A charm paper flutters in a draft that does not exist. He kneels. He presses his wounded forearm against the floor. Pain goes in. Knowledge comes out. This engine wants a number. X screams at Y locations within Z minutes. He unteaches the floor to count tonight. He scatters the math like bread for birds. He stands and the wound in his arm whispers a promise to behave later and does not. He returns to the surface and the curtain over the main concourse thins like a cloud the sun finally wins over. The night ends not with a victory but with a decision. Triage now, hunt later. The emperor stands at the station's mouth with his shoulders a geometry problem that solves panic. Utahime stands at his right. Nanami stands at his left. Gakuganji stands anywhere that lets him pretend this was his plan. Yuji leans against a pillar and tries not to shake so hard his teeth break. Choso disappears into blood and night. Yogo slinks away with a promise to himself. Mahito lingers a second too long. Next time, Mahito sings, backing into shadow that cannot be shadow, because there is too much light tonight. I'll touch the part of you that is still a man. You will find him very old and very uninterested, the emperor says, and the promise is both threat and mercy. Shibuya breathes. Ambulances arrive. Radios lower their voices. A fox mask peeks out of a blanket. Rain returns like a decision. The Emperor's radiance dims a fraction. The projection looks at his hands and imagines them around a lever big enough to move a species. He cannot pull it tonight. He can only keep his pact with the minute. War Council, Nanami says, and it is not a question. We need to decide how to proceed. Yes, the Emperor answers. He looks at the city and sees the next waves rolling in far beyond midnight. He feels the cost like a tax in his bones and pays the down payment. He does not look at the sky. He has already fallen through it. He looks at the faces because he has not saved them to be scenery in his own legend. He nods once to himself, or to someone who was once a man named something that did not matter compared to this. Then he walks toward the van, where Ichichi sits, and makes lists that keep people alive. The light follows him and refuses to be humble. The van becomes a chapel of plastic and maps. Rain ticks on the roof like a metronome. Monitors show broken tunnels and living corridors, heat signatures moving like schools of fish. Ichichi points with a pen cap and voice that won't shake. Utahime leans on the doorframe, sword sheathed, eyes not resting. Nanami stands opposite the golden presence and chooses to treat him as a colleague. We've stabilized Shibuya Station and the Scramble Crossing, he says, but the curtains still partition the inner rings. Jogo and Mahito remain mobile. Kenjaku's fingerprints are on the geometry. Gakuganji's voice comes through an open channel like a judgment writ. Jujutsu High Council has designated the unknown an external special grade. Containment protocols. Save it, Utahime snaps. We're bleeding. We need plan, not paperwork. The Emperor does not sit. He dims his radiance a fraction to spare eyes. The map is a city like a living schematic. He points at 3 red knots that pulse like migraines. These are your anchor arrays, he says. Break 2 and the third becomes a liability to its owner. But he will have prepared redundancies. He will move his weight onto human fear inputs when his hardware fails. Meaning casualties, Nanami says, because he refuses euphemisms, and everyone breathes a little easier for the clarity. Meaning he expects you to make choices, the Emperor answers. He expects those choices to teach his next machine how to hurt you better. Ichichi swallows and says, we can clear lanes if we get a corridor punched through the 4th sublevel. But there's a pocket of hostiles in the utility shafts we can't visualize. Mahito's territory now, Utahime says, and we can't shut down power without killing people in elevators and life support. We need that 4th level corridor to evacuate the med bays. First victory, Nanami says, like ordering a sandwich he doesn't think he deserves. We hit here, here, and here. His pen strikes plastic. Objective? Corridor integrity and anchor disruption with control collateral. If the unknown can neutralize partial domains, he leads. Gakuganji's reply is frost. If the unknown leads, he does it under terms. No exorcism without human oversight. No fatal force on civilians under any condition. No recruitment. No sermons, Utahime finishes, warning and joke both. The Emperor looks at each of them as if cataloguing a library. Terms accepted, he says. I will add 1. I will bind myself to spare every human I can, even if it reduces my efficiency. Nanami frowns. That's not how we phrase it, but yes. The golden figure nods. In my lexicon, that is an oath. In yours, a binding vow. If I declare a limit aloud, I gain leverage against the system that hears me. It will listen. Gakuganji bristles. You would speak our rights as if you own them. I will speak to your world in the grammar it understands, he says simply, and I will pay for understanding. He steps out into the wet air and lifts his voice just enough to be heard by the thing that writes the rules when nobody is looking. I will not kill a human tonight, he says. I will not trade one life for the comfort of many. In return, let my hand be precise. Something nods without being anyone. The field stiffens, then aligns like soldiers learning a different march. Utahime shivers. Nanami feels his ratio settle like a scale finding true zero. Ichichi calls the move. Operation Narrow Gate, he says, surprising himself with the name. 4th sublevel corridor, west axis. Everyone moves. The first engagement is in concrete that sweats and remembers 1978. Pipes rattle. The corridor hums with a low, ugly joy. Mahito's children slither through service ducts like bad ideas. They reach for ankles, habits, histories. The Emperor steps into the middle and drops his aura to floor level. It spreads like clean oil, then rises in planes that separate human meat from hungry geometry. Mahito's altered crawl spaces meet invisible edges and yelp without voices. The walls straighten minutely. The fluorescent buzz steadies. Nanami calls his weak points with a banker's efficiency. There and there. His blade carves the corridor in sections that make sense to physics and to courage. Utahime floats a barrier over the medbay door and plants her feet like a shrine. Yuji appears without saying he was coming. He breathes hard and doesn't look at anyone too long. "I can help," he says, which means I must bleed to pay for earlier. Nanami nods him into a slot where his fists will do the most good and the least damage. Jogo arrives like a rolling blackout. Heat spikes. The Emperor catches the advance wave on a palm and sends it into the ceiling. Steam blooms and then condenses into rain that falls where the corridor needs cleaning. He overpressurizes a pipe with a thought and bursts a sprinkler at the exact second a curtain fragment tries to land. Water sheet intercepts the curse's shape and diffuses it into nonsense. Creative counter-stack. A curse built on crowd crush finds its flaw. Friction tripled and slips like a clown on a polished hell. A fear echo that imitates a fire alarm meets a sound wave tuned to human confidence. The false signal loses the tug of war and dies. A partial domain eats an inch of his aura and chokes on the taste of obligation. Nanami stamps, shifts ratio, and cuts a wedge through a curse band that had teeth for the poor. Utahime's blade flicks and severs thread lines that would have emptied air from lungs. Yuji hits Mahito's toys like a boy given permission to wreck the furniture of a house that hurt him. People stream through behind them in orderly panic. An old man wheels an IV stand like a flag. A nurse bristles at anyone who tries to slow her. A janitor swings his mop at a curse because it is the stick he has, and tonight everything is an instrument. The Emperor senses the first anchor array through 3 different kinds of wrongness. The smell of wet chalk, the feel of rhythms that don't belong to trains, the taste of blood annotated with instructions. It squats in a maintenance hub like a spider altar. He steps in and is careful not to sanctify the space by being there. "Utahime," he says, "I need your ritual hand." She steps up without liking it. He points at chalk figures and tilting bells and folded paper. This line is an invitation. This knot is a calculation. If you cut them in this order, you shout in a language Kenjaku cannot pretend is his. Utahime glances at him, then at the array, and sees it. An insult to craftsmanship, and a way to insult it back. "Cover me," she says, and gets to work. Mahito slides in like laughter spilling off a countertop. "Everyone's doing chores," he sings. "Let's do crafts." His hand darts for her shoulder. The Emperor interposes his forearm and takes the touch where he has already been touched. Pain blooms like a scream pressed into a snowball. Mahito's grin opens wider. "Oh," he says, intrigued. "You carry damage nicely." Yuji's roar answers the moment, not phrased, not elegant. He barrels at Mahito. Their bodies thud like arguments. The Emperor holds his forearm steady and uses the second of contact to write a small word in Mahito's technique. "Stop. It doesn't stick." It lodges like a seed in a crack. Utahime slices, taps, breathes. She doesn't pray. She works. The array gives way with an audible wrong click. The station trembles. The curtain over this axis thins. A map in the van goes from red to amber. Ijichi laughs under his breath and says, 1. Jogo's heat swells from behind the wall like a volcano remembering a debt. The Emperor plants his palm against concrete and tells the wall to be a mountain for a breath. It obeys. The heat washes by, looking for someone to marry. It finds nobody. They move. Control collateral marks their path. A cut cable that will be spliced later. A cracked wall that will keep a secret. A door ripped off its hinge and set aside like a gentleman's coat. People pass. A child presses her fox mask to her face because it is armor that does not have to work to matter. They reach the second anchor and find it guarded by Choso's blood, orbiting like planets owned by rage. He stands in the doorway, eyes black holes. He sees Yuji. The air changes because family is a grenade with a slow fuse. Not now, Nanami says quietly. Decide later. Cut now. Choso's jaw clenches until it creaks. He steps aside, a thin, precise distance. Blood whips at a curse that thought it could be a wall. It becomes a wet stripe on tile. The Emperor inclines his head in thanks, as if these small formalities glue wars together. Utahime goes to the chalk and the bells and the paper. The Emperor's hand finds the field edges and presses them into a shape that will let her cut. Yogo hurls heat and wanders off tasting his failures. Mahito hums and waits for a more interesting angle. They break the second anchor. The curtain ripples like gut-shot cloth. Ijichi's map shows an inner ring losing tension. Civilians flood through the new corridor with the learning of a city that survives by understanding lines. Then they argue because they must. They crowd back into the van, wet and bruised and glowing. Utahime pulls pins out of her hair with irritation for a language. Nanami cleans his glasses even though the lenses are spotless. Yuji stares at his hands. Gakuganji's face floats on a monitor like a thunderhead that never rains. We can open the last ring, Ichichi says, voice too fast. We can, but if we do it now, we expose the West Medbay to a surge. We might lose them. We can set a lethal curtain over the West Medbay, Gakuganji says, the words thick with history. It will kill the curses that surge in. Some collateral is unavoidable. Utahime's face goes very still. There are 27 human patients there, she says, and 7 staff. They will die if Mahito gets in, Gakuganji snaps. A lethal curtain is a mercy. Nanami folds his arms. His voice is sanded down to the truth. Our doctrine exists to prevent extermination-level events. We accept surgical cruelty to avoid famine-scale horror. We do not like it. We do it anyway. Yuji's knuckles whiten. If you kill them to save others, are you any different from Mahito's math? We are entirely different, Gakuganji says, offended on behalf of civilization. We are accountable. The Emperor listens, not flinching from either side. Your doctrine, he says, has kept your species alive in a world that preys on it. It assumes scarcity in courage and time and power. It is a good doctrine for the average day. It is the only doctrine that holds when the best are elsewhere, Nanami says, meaning Gojo without saying Gojo. The Emperor nods. Mercy without survival is vanity. Survival without mercy becomes a factory for the enemies you will fight next decade. He looks at Utahime. You can set a curtain that scrubs curses, but spares humans if a superior will hold it. That's not how they work, Utahime says, because she knows the limits and respects them. It is if we pay, he says. Nanami rubs his temple. What's the bill? I will bind myself further, the Emperor says. No lethal energy emissions in human-adjacent spaces for the next hour. I will narrow my options. In return, the curtain will mirror my intent. It will hurt what wants to hurt and ignore what only wants to live. Gakuganji bristles. You make bargains with the world like it is your court. I make bargains with my own limits, he says, and there is no God voice in it now, only the man who has been doing this for longer than the word old can help you imagine. If I fail, you may try your lethal curtain, but let us not start there. The van becomes a courtroom for a second. Utahime judges the risk. Nanami judges the math. Ichichi judges the timing. Yuji judges himself and finds nothing permissive. Gakuganji judges blasphemy and finds plenty. Utahime says, do it, because she hates herself less on nights she chooses difficult mercy. Nanami nods once. We hold him to the hour. The Emperor steps back into the rain and speaks again, this time a notch lower, as if telling his bones and the city to sign. I will not emit killing force where humans might breathe. I will strike only with shape and weight and permission. In return, let my intentions bend the edges of the curtain in these zones. Something in the field listens. Something reluctant agrees. The air tastes like metal warmed in hands. They reach the third anchor. It sits below a shuttered ramen shop whose logo is a smiling bowl. The ridiculous tenderness of the logo angers Mahito. He kicks the sign on the way in. Choso is gone, cooled by blood's commitments. Jogo sulks out of sight. The Emperor and Utime kneel over chalk again. Nanami and Yuji hold a mouth of corridor with fists and facts. The curtain shivers at the edges like a nervous animal being trained. The first victory arrives not with fanfare but with breath released. The third anchor breaks. The inner ring collapses into patches. Stairwells become roads. The west medbay opens to a corridor that moves. The cost arrives with it. Air cools by 5 degrees in a straight line. The rain outside falls in a tight grid that doesn't fit gravity. The lights hum a new note. A seam opens in the world, not glowing, not loud. An absence draws itself, precise as an eraser redirected by a jealous hand. They look up. The nothing looks back. It is not a curse the way Jogo is a curse, or Mahito. It is a doctrinal object made sin, a monument ground into hunger. Old priests in dead centuries smashed icons and burned scrolls and laughed with relief at how easy God was to carry once you broke him into ideas. Their surplus despair became this. Kenjaku has fed it diagrams until it learned predation. The Emperor recognizes it in a way that hurts. A name tries to form and fails because it is exactly a thing that eats names. He says words anyway, to mark it. No icon, he says. You built a predator out of unbelief. The whole stares at him the way a courtroom stares at a liar. His light dims a degree. The edges of his projection fuzz where symbols live. The aquila on his breastplate becomes 2 lines that do not meet for a second, and the second feels like falling. Nanami's stomach drops in a very human way. Explain, he says. A steady man asking the world to show its receipts. The Emperor does not raise his voice. My projection is a structure, a scaffold of intent and memory sustained by an external beacon. It interacts well with systems that reward ordered belief and committed will. This entity imposes a high entropy operator on those structures. It nullifies technique by unwriting the names the technique believes about itself. It will not erase my causality, weight, heat, motion, but it will shape my influence where it rests on symbol and oath. Utahime sucks air through her teeth. It eats rituals. It eats meaning coded as field, he says. It will try to make me only a mass and a motive. The whole moves without moving. Lights flicker. A charm paper peels itself from a wall and turns to dust. Utahime's barrier hisses like a candle underwater. The Emperor holds up a hand. and the very idea of a halo stumbles. He adjusts. He strips himself down. He stops broadcasting titles. He closes apertures that make him easy to worship. Gold becomes matte, almost ordinary. The Aquila becomes function, not icon. He is less beautiful and more stubborn. No icon advances on the West Med Bay because it can smell the density of belief in rooms where people try so hard not to die. Nanami sets his feet and shifts ratio. The cut he makes is not aesthetic. It is true. The whole swallows the strike. It becomes less elegant and more honest, a pry bar instead of a scalpel. Utahime rewrites her barrier into a fence that doesn't care about names, only about contact and direction. It now reads, "Do not pass through, pass around." No icon presses and slides. Yuji steps up, fists loose. "Tell me what I can hit," he says, and hears laughter inside him that is not his. Sukuna stretches like a cat inside a human cage and watches. The Emperor sees the stretch with the corner of his vigilance and notes the ink of it. "Strike at the environment," the Emperor says. "Force it to express itself in meat space." It hates that. It has to spend itself to stay. Yuji obliges. He punches a concrete pillar at an angle that forces load redistribution. Dust yawns. No icon, committed to erasing the idea of the pillar, has to do it with work instead of decree. It slows. The Emperor grips 2 points in the air and pulls. Invisible angles straighten. The corridor's geometry asserts a boring fact. Squares. No icon flickers as if bored facts hurt. He feels the burn. His left forearm's not wound warms into ache. The faraway choir thins a little, then finds its balance again because it is trained and because suffering finds competence. Kenjaku watches through 30 illegal cameras and 10 senses that are not equipment. He smiles with genuine pleasure. "You are disciplined," he says to the screen. "Good. Let's test the other side." He releases words through channels seeded hours ago, months ago, years before. A rumor made paper, a slogan made joke, an image made shame. The mimetic hex crawls into social feeds and AR filters and the mouth of frightened men. It says, "We aren't worth saving." It says, "We only make worse." It says, "Look how they bleed for nothing." No icon bulges with the meal. The Emperor tastes the shishert in civilians' behavior. Steps hesitate, shoulders sag. A nurse's hand steals over a wound. Intent droops. He cannot sermon. He bound himself. He must act. He walks into the medbay and starts to lift, carry, set down. He becomes a machine of competence. He helps a paramedic tape a chest with the right pressure and then holds a light while a surgeon cuts. He does not glow when he does this. He is a man in armor doing work. It changes nothing, and it changes everything. No icon loses a sliver of its lunch. A nurse smiles through blood. A janitor starts mopping because that is his spell, and it casts fine. Utahime spits hair out of her mouth. "I hate how obvious that is," she says, and then screams orders that are small and effective. Nanami cuts another ratio that is a map instead of a painting. Yuji laughs once, short and sharp, and hits some physics again. The whole recalibrates, finds the most efficient wound. It moves toward the Emperor and presses. His emblem tries to unhappen. He holds the function behind the sign and endures the sensation of being unloved by the universe. He has been here before. He answers with mechanics. He wedges a beam. He steps on a wire. He doesn't let a stretcher roll wrong. He makes meaning by not needing it to shine. No icon is not stopped. It is delayed, made to pay rent. Kenjoku notes the data. He closes his eyes in whatever body he's wearing and sends in a smarter cut. A little patch of air not far away twists, tight and mean. Words written on falling scrolls that don't exist form and unform. a vow inversion. The field becomes a negative. Promises become shackles. Mercy becomes a blade that cuts the hand holding it. Utahime feels her curtain try to bite her. She hisses and throws her will into an ugly knot. It holds. Nanami feels his ratio flip to mock him. He breathes and refuses the temptation to relish the cruelty of clean numbers when they're pointed at the wrong target. The Emperor's vow snaps like a wire across his ribs. It tightens. No lethal force where humans might breathe. He realizes the inversion. If he overextends, his restraint will bind his arms at the worst second. He can't brute force this. He adapts again. He roots through human will instead of over it. He finds the half-formed choices around him. Paramedic deciding to go left or right. Officer deciding to clear this strip or that. And he places encouragement on the wiser path. He becomes a force multiplier in the least romantic sense. No icon slims, then widens, then thins, seeking a gap. It finds one. A prayer plug in the medbay ceiling, left by a nurse who believes in 2 gods and a habit. It tries to eat that and climb down through the hole. The Emperor reaches up and removes the plaque with 2 fingers. He places it in the nurse's hand and nods. "Carry it with you," he says. "Things that are carried are harder to take." The hole flickers in irritation because the rule is true, even in this hungry language. Kenjaku's voice arrives on a cheap radio because theatricality relaxes him. "Impressive," he says, lightly formal, as if declining a dinner invitation. "Would you like to discuss the future of your kind with someone who has a plan and a century?" The Emperor answers without looking at the radio. "Your plan is a euthanasia with choreography. I've seen it before." "Tribal loyalty is adorable at your scale," Kenjaku says. "At mine it's noise. I offer structure. You offer an ending with managed aesthetics," the Emperor says, names sharpening like chisels. "You are Star Religious Group and Jujutsu HQ's dead moral core, and every technocrat that ever decided the average human does not deserve a horizon. You are clever. You are too small." Kenjaku's smile clicks off with the radio. No icon hums louder. They fight it in the only way that works. They keep working. Utahime holds a curtain with Will's knuckles. Nanami escorts 30 souls through a corridor with cuts that are also diagrams of kindness. Yuji becomes a trustworthy machine, a teenage body carrying bodies older than his father. The Emperor makes a choice in the middle of it, that he will pay for later. He splits attention again. He sends a thread of himself up through the world and out into the night to find where the mimetic hex is being sprayed. He follows it into 4 apartment balconies where men scroll and sneer and sigh. He nudges their thumbs. He makes them put the phone down and pick up a towel and run into the street to carry water because their mothers taught them better. The hex loses a little oxygen. He feels the choir stutter in far distance, feels the light on terror lean. He shoulders it. No icon makes a last push toward the West Med Bay. It pours itself thin to slip past the fence of simple rules. The Emperor grips the floor and the ceiling and presses. He reduces the space until the whole must choose. It chooses to be small and effective or large and dull. It chooses small. He forces it into a tube and then into a coin and then into a point. Nanami steps up and cuts the point with a ratio that would make a mathematician in another world weep. The point snaps. The absence disappears, not killed, but retired. Utahime collapses a centimeter in relief and refuses to show more. Yuji leans his head on a wall and pretends not to hear laughter inside him. The med bay breathes. The fox mask girl's mother takes a sip of water and cries into the cup, as if her mouth learned a new way to be. Ichichi taps the monitor with the original 3 rings, all red, broken or thin. "We did it. he says to the empty air he's made his friend. We actually did it. Gakuganji's face returns to the screen. He is pale with rage, which is indistinguishable from fear in men like him. You have violated doctrine, he says to Utahime and Nanami, eyes skittering over the golden presence. You have allowed an unknown to twist our rights. Utahime wipes sweat from her lip with the back of her wrist. We saved people. We allowed an external to influence our tools, Gakuganji says, as if names keep blood off hands. Nanami lets him talk until he breathes. We will submit reports, he says, and the promise sounds like execution, but is really how he keeps the world from turning into shouting. The Emperor raises his hand before another rule becomes a wall. You require me under terms, he says. I accept again. But hear me. You cannot win a war of meaning by loving rules more than people. Your rules must love people. Gakuganji's pupils narrow. You are a god, and you will speak like one until the day you leave us, and we count our dead. I am a man refusing comfort, the Emperor says. It sounds like godhood because men forget the sound. Utahime wants to laugh and weep. Nanami wants to sleep. Yuji wants to punch the laughter in his ribs into silence, and can't. Chichi wants to go home and iron his shirt, and then come back, because there is always another shift. The alarm doesn't come from a siren. It comes from a boy in a black sweatshirt, stumbling down a stairwell with red on his chin, and a look like a miracle about to fail. He's mumbling apologies to someone not here. He's saying names that don't belong to him. He collapses into Nanami's arms. Where? Nanami asks, Han already on the radio. The boy points, shaking. Subway, platform 12. Something wrong with his face, masks. Mahito smiles somewhere because a mask is in the sentence. Jogo snarls because he knows what comes when he is sidelined. Kenjaku leans in his chair and taps his fingers, bored with small wins. The Emperor feels a presence like a canyon smile. It yawns inside Yuji in a way that isn't spatial. It tastes like a throne that never admits a guest. A finger traces the inside of a human mouth like an owner testing a cage. You're having a party, Sukuna says through Yuji without sound, and the Emperor hears it as clearly as a chime struck inside bone. Leave a chair. The map shifts again. This is not a curse band or a doctrinal object. This is a person-shaped disaster with a crown. Nanami meets Utahime's eyes. They both understand that the next move may stop being a team sport. Ichichi checks oxygen levels because it's what he can do and therefore holy. Gakuganji says something about protocols and is ignored, even by the part of him that knows better. The Emperor adjusts his focus. He tightens his vow around his wrists like cuffs he chose. He reminds himself that gravity is honest and symbols are extras he can hire or fire. He looks at Yuji and sees the boy's spine straighten under a weight he didn't ask to bear. War council is over, Nanami says, voice steady. We move. They move, and the night changes key. The rings are broken and evac flows, but the city's center still groans. Gojo is gone. The night has shifted from rescue to reckoning. Platform 12 is a cathedral of concrete and humming lines. Advertising screens flicker with the wrong weather. Talismans hang like drowned moths from the ceiling. A train sits silent, doors open, lights low. Its reflection in the window stutters a frame behind reality, as if the world is buffering. Ichichi feeds the channel with a plainness that saves lives. Heat signatures minimal, residual cursed energy severe, mimetic contamination ongoing but declining in the west bays. Platform 12 is the last deep pocket before the surface grid. Nanami walks the edge and reads the damage like ledgers. Objective: identify the center of gravity. Evacuate remaining civilians. Deny Kenjaku additional data. Utahime's hand hovers over her sword hilt. Expect mojito. Expect worse. The Emperor stands on tile that remembers 10,000 late trains. His light is dimmed to function. His aura runs close to the skin, like an oath kept in a whisper. Kenjaku wants a test. He already won one. He wants to see how I fail. Faux goals, Nanami prompts. Because names sharpen the knife. Break your strongest social compact, the Emperor says. Replace competence with spectacle. Convert this city's ability to help itself into a story about futility. And he looks at Yuji, who has joined them with breath burned ragged and eyes refusing to be young. Wake the king you keep in a boy. Why standard counters fail, Utahome says flat. Say it. Because the king's domain does not lock a room, the Emperor answers. It draws a map and writes the cuts directly on bodies within range. Barriers are pages to him. He writes on the skin. Yuji swallows. The laugh inside his chest is a finger on a piano key, patient and amused. He's close, Yuji says, as if admitting a guest came early. They step onto the platform. The air goes thinner, louder. A paper lantern someone forgot to take down spins slowly and never stops. A woman in a business suit crouches by a pillar, hands over ears, eyes shut, as if the sound is a shape pressing on her skull. Mom, Nanami says, gentle in a way he permits himself rarely. Stand and walk with me. She does. She doesn't know why she trusts him. She just does. The tiles to the north side darken like they're soaking up ink. Yuji's shoulders pull back without his permission. His mouth opens. 2 more arms bloom inside his flesh and then relent. Not yet. The Emperor places a hand at his back. No power, just a machine of touch. And the boy breathes once in unison and wins the second. Mahito lounges on the opposite platform like a cat pretending not to care who brought it a bird. He waves. He's almost here, he sings. I love when landlords show up. The ad screens go red with a color human bodies understand as insistence. The floor grows faint grid lines that weren't laid by any surveyor. Wind moves where the air is still. The feeling is not of something entering. It is of a room remembering its true owner. Yuji's lips curl without him. His eyes narrow in a way that belongs to an older predator. He turns and looks at the Emperor, and the smile is a temple desecrated by a brushstroke. You walk like a city that refuses arson, Sukuna says through Yuji, and the voice hits the ears and the ribs both. Let's see if your fire codes matter. Nanami guides the last 3 civilians into a service stairwell and slams the gate. Utahime plants barrier anchors in 4 corners, with the decisive taps of a musician counting in a piece she didn't choose. The Emperor steps away from the others because fights like this punish proximity. This world, he says to Sukuna, wanted a man in this boy to keep it honest. I will respect that want. Sukuna's smile deepens, relieved to find an opponent who understands the theatre. I was bored the moment the 6 eyes vanished. You are a novelty. Don't die cheaply. The platform falls out of conversation and into math. A tattooed shrine blooms in the air but leaves no walls. The radius is an idea with a razor's edge. A sound like wire singing fills the space. Malevolent shrine opens with the casual indecency of a king removing a shirt. Cuts arrive from directions people don't have names for. They are not beams, they are decisions. The Emperor moves in a way that is not pretty, but is perfectly positioned. He raises planes in the field and tilts them. The cuts slide off into harmless vector noise and carve lines into adboards that show mountains that have never seen Tokyo. Sukuna squints, pleased. Your barrier is memory-given spine. Your density is absurd. I can work with that. He flexes 2 invisible muscles, cleave and dismantle. One targets cursed energy density. The other targets the category of a thing. The first wave glances and shears off. The second wave does not. It looks at the Emperor's projection and names it. Not wrong, not right, but in a way that matters. Special grade, self-sustaining, external, arrogant. The cut finds a seam where symbol meets function and slips in like a letter opener under wax. The world tilts. The Emperor's chest plate doesn't crack. It forgets a pattern for half a second. The aquila splits and refuses to meet the way one does on a child's drawing. Light thins. The oath lines that reinforce his projection snap taut and bite back. Pain is the number he knows. It arrives honest. He files it and corrects. He tightens his existence around what cannot be unnamed. Mass, heat, motion, duty. He sheds rank, helmet, fanfare. Gold becomes working metal. The cut takes the cloak and leaves the shoulders. He steps sideways and pushes a woman's drop phone beneath a bench with his toe as if tidying matters while he bleeds. Sukuna walks without moving, the way anger walks inside a house. Your symbol is edible, he muses, but you have meat under the plate. Good, use it. He throws a new angle. It's not just cuts now. It's a wedge leaning into the Emperor's vows. No lethal force in human-adjacent spaces. He levers it. The vow tightens around the Emperor's wrists at the exact second he would have chosen the cruel, fast move that ends a threat. Options shutter. Don't touch him, Utahim shouts. Too late to be useful and exactly in time to be a human voice in a room that would rather be a chessboard. Mahito giggles and drops from above with a hand that wants to pet a soul until it breaks. The Emperor pivots and lets the cursed hand slide along his gauntlet into the scar on his forearm. The contact lights the earlier injury with a white ache. Mahito's eyes light with genuine delight. You're layered, he says, admiring the craft. I could spend a year in there. You won't have the year, Nanami answers, and his blade cuts Mahito's approach in a diagram of denial. The curse peels off, not hurt as a person is hurt, but set back as an experiment is set back. The Emperor takes the second to speak within himself where the vow hears. Hold, he tells it. Do not bind my hands when restraint is kindness. The world does not negotiate directly. It respects consistency. It agrees to a degree, enough for a grip, not a kill. Sukuna closes the distance with the infinity of a man who makes distance irrelevant. The Emperor meets him with a strike that is not sacred, not named, just weight moving at the speed weight prefers. Their contact is quiet and terrible. Tile cracks, rails flex. Sukuna laughs, delighted. The slashes adjust again. Cleave calibrates to the highest density in the room and finds it is still the Emperor. Dismantle drifts toward category and decides human is a category too. The blade of the decision turns toward Yuji's body for a moment, like a dog sniffing a familiar door. Sukuna puts a foot on the leash with a chuckle. Careful, the Emperor says to the king inside a boy, not as advice, but as law. Sukuna's eyes glitter. Do you think I forget what sustains me? He is my shrine. The platform fills with music nobody wants to dance to. The Emperor shifts his defense. He begins to catch the decisions earlier, at the level where intent becomes vector. He pushes intent sideways into obligation. Cuts meant for throats shave hair and ego instead. The room is not empty of people. Two subway workers who refuse to leave their post crouch behind a maintenance cabinet and whisper a prayer to a god neither can name without laughing. A student hides under a bench and texts his mother, I am okay, and means it for the first time tonight. The vow feels their breath and tightens kindly. Sukuna grows bored of gentle parries. Let me press your symbol, he says, and the shrine in the air thrums. The cuts become a spiral. The spiral becomes a drill. It seeks the Emperor's crest again, not to erase it this time, but to pin him to it. He lets it hit. The wound is not on the body, it is on the idea. The Aquila becomes two tired lines, then one, then returns wrong, slightly asymmetrical. The wrongness crawls out along oath lines and into the projection's joints. His left knee says pain like a man remembers stairs. His right shoulder remembers weight it did not carry. The hurt is old and new at once. He refuses to fall. He takes the rail with his hand and uses it as a lever to throw Sukuna's next step a fraction off. The fraction saves someone 3 meters away whose throat would have been a lesson. Sukuna grins with all the enjoyment of a monster whose favorite toy just discovered a new squeak. "You can bleed the way I like," he says cheerfully. "Good. Bleed fun." Yuji, inside the cage, jams both hands against the bars. His voice rises like a human trying to be a bell. "Stop using me," he says to a god who doesn't stop because he is told. The effort costs him something private and bright. It buys a heartbeat, the cuts stutter. The emperor takes the heartbeat and makes a wall out of it. He folds his aura in a tight square around Utahime's anchors so she can adjust without being turned into a diagram. He drags a subway worker to a safe angle with a foot. He headbutts Mahito when Mahito leans too close, because sometimes old solutions are correct. Mahito's delighted yelp is obscene. "You are very rude," he says, laughing. Jogo arrives late with a torch he thinks is new. He flares heat that should sterilize the platform of oxygen. The emperor cups the heat, angling it up and away, turns it into a thermal draft that lifts dust and despair into the ceiling to be filtered by machines built for a different war. Jogo roars, offended the physics didn't want to be legendary. Sukuna takes one step, and everything on the platform must decide whether it is an altar or not. The emperor decides no, gently. He meets Sukuna with a strike at the elbow, subtle, mean. It costs him. Cleave adapts in the instant and slides along the line between man and mantle, finds purchase, opens a cut that is not healing like flesh heals. He recoils because he chooses to live. Pain expands. The choir far away goes thin, as if a dozen candles guttered in a draft. He speaks a word without saying it. Sorry. It goes nowhere and everywhere and makes nothing better. Sukuna feels the flicker and inhales like a wine critic. "Ah," he says, eyes bright. "Foreign supply chain." Your throne chokes. "Stop talking to him," Yuji says through teeth that want to be fangs. Sukuna ignores his shrine and leans closer to the emperor, as if sharing a secret between kings. "You run on sacrifice. Own it. Let me feed you. Let me write a law you can enforce. Slaughter is clarity. This city is a spreadsheet that begs to be balanced. The temptation fits so well, it should have been tailored. And perhaps Kenjiku did measure him with a tape measure across centuries. He could end this by ending the boy. He could end the culling before it starts by killing 1,000 now and saving 1,000,000 later. He has made numbers sit up straight before. He knows how to be cruel for reasons that freeze men in place. He refuses with a movement so small it looks like another block. He lets the cut land because the fist he would have thrown would have put a human in an equation, as a variable he was willing to lose. He takes the hurt, and the hurt is conceptual. It carves a groove in his vow, and will try to live there tomorrow. Blood drips off nothing into nothing. It still smells like iron. Boring, Sukuna says, which is the insult he reserves for courage that doesn't entertain. The sacred intervention arrives like an accident. The little fox shrine outside in the alley rings by itself. A windless chime. It rings because a mother who still smells like tearsol put a coin in the box without asking a return. It rings because a city clerk straightened the fallen Ema hours ago, like the world deserved order. It rings because the world sometimes encourages the better experiment. The sound touches the platform like a note drawn across a wire. For an instant, every cut waiting to happen asks a question. The Emperor uses the question as a wedge. He pushes the edges of the shrine outward so they scrape tile, not skin. Utahime slips a fresh anchor into a hairline, and the barrier becomes less beautiful and more stubborn. Nanami shifts ratio with a carpenter's eye and turns a lethal angle into an inconvenient corner. Sukuna laughs again because even annoyance delights him when it stretches him. The gods of alleys, he says, mocking and respectful in the strange way he can be both. Play. He throws his final pressure for the minute. The shrine thrum spikes. The platform's geometry threatens to become a statement about ownership. The Emperor elevates the only thing Sukuna cannot purchase: consistency. He makes himself smaller, truer. He becomes weight, motion, duty. He lets the symbol die where it is inconvenient. The cuts slow. They don't stop. They never stop. But they begin to want to choose the wrong targets less often. Mahito uses the distraction to move on a cluster of evacuees coming down the stairs too slowly. Because stairs were made for different nights, he reaches. Yuji breaks from the duel without waiting for permission and hits Mahito so hard, the curse's face loses its animation for a half second and shows nothing behind the mask. "You're not allowed," Yuji pants, voice hoarse and holy with a teenager's absolute. "Not them." Mahito's smile returns brighter. "You say aloud like it's a law," he purrs. "Make me." Nanami steps between them and makes him. Sukuna tests the Emperor's eyes and finds them unchanged. He marks that as unfashionable and interesting. He lets Malevolent's shrine contract. The grid lines fade. The ad screens show mountains again, as if they were ever real. "This was diverting," he says. "When you have killed for the million, we will be friends." "We will never be friends," the Emperor says. "You can be understood without being accompanied." Sukuna stretches inside Yuji with a lazy cat's promise. "Then survive me." He recedes, not gone, never gone, but content with the weight he has placed on the scale. The boy sags and catches himself on a pillar, eyes flooded with human again. He looks at the Emperor and expects judgment and receives none more than the pressure of a hand on his shoulder, steadying, not claiming. Mahito licks blood from his thumb because he read somewhere that villains should, and vanishes into piping like a rumor through an office. Jogo throws one last petty flame out of embarrassment and flees when it fails to take a curtain with it. He mutters about gods and men and wants to set a forest on fire to feel large again. The platform returns to a recognizable kind of wrong. The Emperor stands with his shoulders and his wound. The cut on his chest plate is not visible, but his aura now wobbles at a frequency that makes certain lies easier to tell themselves. He notes it and hates it, and understands it is his to carry. Codex note: Malevolent. Shrine's barrierless deployment bypasses perimeter negotiation. Its attacks interrogate targets by category and density, allowing adaptive slicing that exploits semiotic scaffolds in projected entities. They gather in the shadow of a vending machine that still believes in coins. Ichichi breathes into the radio and says everyone is alive who can be, which is not consolation, but is better than despair. Nanami looks at the Emperor's left forearm, where soul burn glows faint beneath armor. Prognosis, he says, because naming is caring when you won't make it into a poem. Corruption, the Emperor answers without fear to make it smaller. The soul wound Mahito gave me resonates with the vow strain and Sukuna's semiotic cut. It will try to change how my projection writes itself. It will try to make me prefer efficiency over empathy, and it will justify it with math. Utahime makes a face that is professional and hurt. That's unpleasantly specific. I have lived a long time with ghosts that call themselves policy, he says. This is a new name for an old friend. Yuji scrubs his face with both hands until the skin turns red. He wanted you to kill me, he says. He doesn't ask if it would have been right. He knows the answer should be no, and fears the world thinks otherwise. He wanted me to agree with him about what men are worth, the Emperor says. I did not. It cost us blood. It will cost us more tomorrow. That is why I must bind myself in front of a court that can punish me if I forget. Gakuganji stumps down the stairs, as if refusing gravity the right to touch his boots. He stops when he sees the state of the room and the state of the golden presence. He opens his mouth and a rule comes out halfway and dies. You will be judged, he says finally, almost relieved, by those who hold judgment. Yes, the Emperor says, and nobody expected him to accept that word so easily. My projection must be re-anchored. Your world's rights have touched it. I carry a scratch that will become a habit if not named. If I proceed without sanction, I become an autocracy with hands. Supreme authority, Nanami says, not mocking. Who judges you? Your council, your church, your throne. The last word is said like a man lifting an object to see how much it weighs. The throne judges me, the Emperor says. He looks at the ceiling as if it were a sky half a galaxy thick. And the women with empty souls who keep it honest, and the men in gold who love me enough to say no. And if you come, the colleagues who will not be impressed by pageantry. Utahime raises an eyebrow. You want to take us to your house? I want witnesses with standing, he says. If I continue in your war, I will do so under a new mandate that respects your grammar. I will not write it alone. Gakuganji almost smiles, which is painful to watch. You speak as if my disapproval were invited. It is required, the Emperor says, and the old man stares at him as if a temple just bowed back. Nanami checks his watch. It isn't a watch, it's a habit. We can leave a skeleton crew, he says, the words properly dry. Utahime, Ijichi, myself. The boy goes nowhere near your throne. Yuji opens his mouth to protest, then closes it, because tonight taught him the value of accepting a seat when it keeps someone else safer. Joso? Utahime asks, glancing at the shadows where blood might be thinking. He won't come, Nanami says. He has his own court. Brothers, Mahito whispers from a vent, because he cannot help but try to spoil the good. Take them to your church, he coos. Let them watch you worship yourself. Utahime flicks a shikigami into the vent like a sharp word. Mahito laughs and departs, still trying lines for later. Jogo throws heat into the night to remind himself he exists and swears revenge on anyone who will listen, which is nobody. Ijichi rolls up the evacuation map and looks older by a year. Routes are stable, he reports. We can hand off to civil defense. If you're going to wherever, go now, before Kenjaku threads a new needle. Nanami considers the proposal for 3 steps of silence. We will go and return, he says. Not because I trust you, unknown, but because I know we are out of doctrine, and because the way you ask to be judged sounds like someone who has done this too long to enjoy it. Yuji touches his sternum. And because I trust him, he says, surprising himself. Not the god part, the part that keeps lists. The Emperor nods to the boy with the respect one gives a comrade who will suffer more than is fair. He turns and carves a doorway in the air, not with power, but with permission. The space acknowledges him. A corridor opens. That is not the webway exactly, but a cousin that grew up in a different city. The air on the threshold smells like resin and old gold and burning prayers. It tastes like a choir holding a note for centuries. Utahime's eyes widen because she feels the rules tighten and then relax in a rhythm that has nothing to do with her school and everything to do with authority that does not apologize. Nanami adjusts his tie as if attending court. Escort, he says. Proceed. Gakuganji snorts. I attend to ensure you don't return with a god on your leash, he says to Nanami and Utahime, then adds grudgingly, and to tell them their emperor has manners. Yuji takes a step forward. Nanami's hand is already on his shoulder to hold him back. No, Nanami says, but it doesn't carry contempt, only logic. You are the battleground. We won't march the war into our host's throne room. Yuji accepts it because someone else is making a decision that protects him, and the relief is medicinal and bitter. The emperor leaves a portion of himself behind. A network of quiet pushes where stairwells meet patience and corridors meet intention. He looks once more at the platform that will become a story people tell about the night they didn't die. Hold the city, he tells the city, and the city says it will try. They step through. The door closes as casually as it opened. The platform exhales and sags into the work of counting survivors. The corridor on the other side is wide enough for a parade and quiet enough for confession. Lamps hang like stars forced to behave. The floor is a mosaic of battles that feel inevitable and stupid. Utahime shivers at the pressure of silence, engineered, disciplined silence that eats sound the way a cathedral eats whispers. Nanami walks with shoulders squared, eyes reading vector, angle, kill zones, as if it were any hallway that could be defended with a chair and a good back. Gakuganji walks as if offended by grandeur, but at home in it. The emperor's wound speaks to him in the language of bad habits. It suggests shortcuts. It suggests myths, where men and numbers and a clean column saves a dirty city. He listens the way you listen to a weather report you cannot change, and chooses his coat anyway. He is not alone in the corridor. Two figures meet them and are not announced. One wears armor that reflects nothing. He is gold but not gaudy. His spear makes the air stand taller. The other is a woman whose presence makes the lights dim out of respect. Her eyes are the absence that teaches sorcery humility. They do not speak. They turn and lead. Utahime does not bow because bowing feels like a lie. She nods with the minimal precision she would afford any worthy ritual. Nanami inclines his head a degree, acknowledging competence. Gakuganji refuses any motion that could be quoted against him in a report. The emperor's projection grows thinner with each step, not because the path strips him, but because he chooses to be smaller, this close to the thing that can afford to be everything. He holds onto wound and duty both. Behind them, in a city that has earned its sleep, Mahito perches on a street lamp and hums, bored and thrilled. Kenjaku watches an old recording of a child laughing and calibrates his next bracket. Jogo sits under an awning and smokes a cigarette he found because rituals make even curses feel like men. On platform 12, a janitor finishes mopping and leans on his broom and cries one short, private sob. He straightens, embarrassed and proud, and goes back to work. They walk between lamps that hum like kept stars. Behind them, Tokyo breathes, stitched but bleeding. Ahead, judgment. The corridor holds silence the way a well holds water, by pressure and design. Utahime matches her breathing to the rhythm so the weight sits better. Nanami counts doorways and hazards, and the places you could make a last stand with only a chair. Gakuganji refuses to look awed. The escorts do not look back. They pass a chapel cut into the wall where medici and sacristy are the same room. The benches are brass, and the air tastes antiseptic and incense. A woman in grey tends trays of instruments that are not knives and are knives both. The gold-armoured guard salutes her without sound. She touches the emperor's forearm through the armour as if greeting an old wound. The scar on his soul burns with embarrassed familiarity. Cost, she says. The first word here not his. Dogma. Dogma keeps Cost honest, he says. Cost keeps dogma from becoming a flag. Nanami listens like a student who failed once and learned a better way to keep notes. How many, he asks, not to test but to map. Does it take to power you? Many, the Emperor answers. Already marked for death by other hands. Already written out of other ledgers. I tried to make their last breath a more useful word. Utahime wipes rain from her hair with fingers that remember sweat and blood more than perfume. And if you discovered a different engine, I would change, he says, and the simplicity lands hard. Gakuganji snorts. Convenient. Dangerous, the silent woman says. Her voice is a wind in winter. No engine changes without writ. They walk on. The corridor widens into a transept where mosaics show wars you don't talk about in classrooms. Men in gold armor stand like arguments given muscle. Women with null eyes watch in a way that makes Utahime's skin tingle and her technique curl in on itself like a hand in cold water. Nanami's ratio still works. Math is stubborn even without applause. Your blanks, Utahime says, flexing and releasing her fingers as sensation shifts. They erase. Persuasion. They unwrite the parts of the world that mistake theatre for law, the Emperor says, approving and wary at once. Stand near them and be honest by necessity. Gakuganji takes one step closer to a blank on purpose and endures the humiliation of feeling smaller. He does not step back. That too is doctrine. Past the transept, the corridor narrows as if forcing humility to fit. The light shifts. A shadow slides across the floor that does not belong to any figure present. It is tall in the way ambition is tall. It walks without feet. The spearman halts. The silent sister's hand rises, palm outward. They feel a draft of meaning, cold as thrift. Kenjaku's patience finds a vector. The mirror steps out of the seam, as if the seam had been waiting to be a door. It looks like the Emperor after an audit. Leaner, paler, the heraldry shaved off. The hands clean in the way that means they never touched anything they didn't plan. Its aura reads as efficiency. The crest on his chest is not a bird. It is a bar chart. Its eyes hold a calm only spreadsheets bless. Kenjaku's voice arrives with it like a caption. Optimized model. Acceptable loss ratio. Nanami's jaw tightens, not in fear, but with recognition of a colleague gone feral. Utahime makes a sound in her throat that people who hate numbers when wielded like knives make. Gakuganji hides the flinch and unslings his staff like a verdict heavy with notes. The mirror bows a fraction. I am you without liturgy, it says to the Emperor. Without vows performed as theatre, I convert breaths to outcomes with less waste. The boy dies. The city learns to grieve efficiently. Your choir rests. Patron, the Emperor says, and his voice puts a tag on the thing to deny it anonymity. Kenjaku's culling game calculus. Affiliation acknowledged, the mirror says, pleased by categorization. I am the solution you were almost ready to choose. Utahime spits on the floor, because it is better than vomiting. You're not a curse, she says. You're a policy. The mirror smiles like a report card, with only one grade that matters. I'm an answer that does not apologize. The clash begins without a motion order. The mirror leans forward, and the corridor shortens by decisions. The Emperor meets it with the one place he still carries emblem. Duty. Their fields touch. The mirror's force is clean. It slides under his vows and tries to write a new mandate. Expedience. His escorts move. The spear is a line that breaks nested answers. The sister's null suggests a silence so total the mirror's edges stutter. Nanami steps diagonally, because geometry is brave. Gakuganji raises his staff and strikes, not at the mirror, but at the memory of men who love math more than people. It lands. Utahime throws a barrier that is not pretty. It is a sign that says assembly area. The mirror has to root around it, because even optimizers respect workplace safety when it is written into the floor plan of souls. The Emperor feels where the cut will come. The mirror's attack is a budget that needs balance. It will snip the ribbon around his oath and call it waste. He braces with intent that is unsaleable. The strike lands at the seam of his projection, where the Aquila once was proud. The old wound lights. He swallows the urge to admire the elegance of the attempt. He answers with friction. Their fight is a short thesis, not a brawl. He refuses 3 efficiencies. He accepts 2 inefficiencies. He lets one catastrophe pass because stopping it would be a precedent. He does not want to teach his hands. The corridor itself intervenes. A chime runs along the lamps the way a spine shivers. The spear point of the escort glows as if it remembered a line from an old oath. The sister's null deepens in a way that threatens to be kind. The mirror calculates that killing today will cost tomorrow's legitimacy. It steps back with the smug of a tool that knows it is still in the kit. Reach the throne, the sister says. The first command she has given in hours. Sanction or sever. The mirror fades into the seam it came from, leaving the smell of ink and rain. Kenjaku's laugh follows, satisfied and bored. He has seen what he wanted, which way the unknown leans when pushed by a promise of clean cruelty. They move again. The hallway opens into an antechamber wider than any logic that ever ran a train. A city could rest beneath this ceiling. The light is not daylight. It is a pressure. The floor becomes glass ribs lit from within by stories. Air grows thin, as if all talk must pay a tax. Beyond the antechamber, a gate rises like a sermon given architecture. It is gold in the way that convinces thieves to take ordination. It is guarded by men whose gaze makes bad plans sit down. Between them stand women whose presence makes the world admit it should mind its tone. The gate opens on hinges that move like continents choosing. They step into a world that is both fortress and chapel. A planet seems to rise beyond the hall's far windows, but the scale is a trick. The room is the size of arrogance, not astronomy. The throne sits at the far end on a dais that is not steps, but stations of a long argument. Wires like veins feed it. Candles that do not care about fire line the path. The whispers are not wind, they are names. Utahim's throat tightens at the sound of vows crawling along the air. Nanami's jaw sets, not with stubbornness, but with respect for a job done badly and well for too long. Gakuganji feels at home, which alarms him. The Emperor's projection bows not to the chair, but to the work. He walks forward until the air agrees to judge him. The escorts peel off and take positions that mean leave if you are a fool and approach if you must. The audience is silent, because this is not a debate to be won by applause. The sister stands at the Emperor's side and becomes silence personified. Nanami, Utahime, and Gakuganji stop at a mark laid into the floor as a favor to those who need marks to feel steady. The exchange is not words. It is weight passed back and forth in scales of attention. The throne reminds him what he swore before language. He shows it his new vows shaped by another world. The throne runs its hands along his wound like a blind father checking an old scar and hating the surgeon for being right. He presents Shibuya, the evacuation as technique, the restraint as leverage, the whole that ate symbols, the shrine that rang without request. He presents the boy with the king in his chest. He presents the mirror and his rejection. He does not hide the part where he wanted to accept because efficiency is a drug that smells like salvation. The throne does not cajole. It does not absolve. It weighs. He feels the light travel through his vow lines and settle in his bones, as if new annotations were being written in the margins of his hands. The sister's null opens like a winter sky. The sorcerers feel their technique stilled to a courteous quiet. Utahime breathes easier without the constant itch to cast. Nanami's ratio becomes more honest without the sugar rush of cursed energy smoothing corners. Gakuganji discovers his staff weighs what it weighs. Under this attention, lies die quickly. The Emperor finds himself smaller and better. He commits to it. He will not broadcast symbol unless symbol serves somebody else. He will tie his force to proximate human will. He will accept being slower when being fast would teach the wrong lesson. The throne places a hand on his shoulder. It is not a hand. It is a pressure like a nation choosing. It sets his operating envelope here, under a mandate that is not imperial but neighborly. Under the new mandate, his projection cannot kill any human, even at range, even by a mission dressed as strategy. His aura cannot overwrite local ritual without a living practitioner co-signing the change. In the presence of blanks, he becomes meat and momentum first. Psyche architecture retreats to scaffolding. Against anti-symbol prey like no icon, he must privilege mechanics over metaphors. Far draw on his beacon is throttled. If he splits attention beyond a defined quorum, his precision drops before his power does. Nanami watches the lines of light thicken and thin over the golden figure's frame and understands a little of limits by looking. Utahime feels the barrier around the mandate like a diagram of good practice pinned to a wall. Gakuganji recognizes a sanction and relaxes before catching himself. The sister finally speaks, her voice the sound of a law read from paper rather than sung. Procedure sanction projection, bound to approximate human will, bound to mercy first, survival second, doctrine third, violation invites severance, witnesses present. Do you accept? I accept, the Emperor says. And the acceptance feels like choosing a smaller sword because the hand you will hand it to is not yours. Something in the vast machine that is not a machine signs. The pageantry moves, quiet and heavy. The men in gold nod without blinking. The women in null do not nod because agreement is not their task. The throne becomes watchful without moving. Utahime bows because she is not petty when the world does something she approves. Nanami stands straighter as if his spine received a memo. Gakuganji huffs once, very softly, and says nothing, which is how he admits he is wrong. On the way out, the spearman falls in a step behind. He looks at Nanami like one soldier seeing another. You keep ledgers, he says. First words from his mouth all day. Keep this one. He presses a coin into Nanami's hand. Heavy, old, stamped with 2 scales. It is not money. It is a license. Utahime touches the sister's wrist, a gesture so tiny it would go unnoticed anywhere else. You hate our world, she says, more observation than insult. I hate how it tempts you, the sister answers. I admire how you hold anyway. Gakuganji pretends he heard nothing and concentrates on the feel of wood in his palms, the old comfort. As they turn back toward the corridor, the mirror foe waits one last time at a respectful distance, like a consultant expecting to be rehired. It inclines its head a degree. Terms accepted, it says. I am within policy. You exist at my patron's pleasure, the Emperor says, and I decline his pleasure. Until you cry uncle, the mirror says, not unkindly. I will keep a chair warm. The spear dips infinitesimally in warning. A bell rings somewhere that is not a bell. The mirror withdraws. Kenjiku files away the tone for later use. They step back into the transit. The lamps hum a shade friendlier. The corridor feels shorter because commitment makes distances less coy. The wound on the Emperor's arm no longer glows. It simmers, disciplined. The aquila does not return in gold. It returns as 2 thin lines that meet only when someone else is near to need it. Utahime exhales hard enough to count as a laugh. We just audited a god. No, Nanami says, sliding the coin into his pocket like a promise he will balance. We watched an adult ask for supervision. Gakuganji rolls his shoulders. And we signed as witnesses, he says, almost proud, then catches himself being almost human in a room that enjoys it and scowls back into being a councilman. The escorts stop at the last bend and let them walk the final stretch alone. It is a compliment. It is a warning. It is both. At the threshold, the Emperor hesitates. Half a breath, no more. He looks back at the gate and the weight. He does not reach for it. He faces forward. Tokyo waits, a mess with pride. New mandate, he says softly, not to himself, but to the city he will re-enter. Mercy first, survival second, doctrine third. Utahime nods sharp. We'll hold you to it. Please do, he says, and steps through as if the night cannot afford another second of pageantry. On the other side, the scent of wet concrete and human fear and fried food hits like an anthem. The radio coughs to life in Ichichi's van, startled by ghosts returning. Status, he asks, then hears his own voice crack and clears it. Status. Sanctioned, Nanami says, dry as law. Under witness. We're coming back. He looks at the Emperor, whose radiance is smaller and more trustworthy, and wonders if that is how you put a god on a diet. Make him eat only what your people hand him. They do not know that in the time they were away, Kenjaku set 2 new needles and threaded a rumor through 2 districts. They do not know that Mahito learned a new note in the Song of Soul Torture from the way the mirror spoke. They do not know that Jogo, insulted, went to find an oil tank and a stubborn wind. They will learn all that soon enough. For now, they reach the stairs to platform 12 and find 2 subway workers still at their posts, eyes ringed and proud. The men nod to Nanami like colleagues. He nods back like a shift lead does when the rookies did not run. The Emperor glances at the fox mask in a little girl's hands as she sleeps on a blanket. He loosens his hand at his side and lets the ache travel and leave. He has a mandate now that makes pain not a trophy but a receipt. They descend into the not quite still battle with a map rewritten in blood and permission. The city opens its jaws and allows them to try again. They descend into work. The vans have moved. The scramble crossing is a field hospital wearing neon. Steam curls off manholes as if the city is a living thing exhaling. Ichichi's voice threads orders into air that doesn't want to listen and makes it behave. Utahime draws fresh paper. Nanami rolls his sleeves with the bored anger of a man who respects rituals because they work. The Emperor's brightness settles into a thinner band close to his skin. He moves, and the corridors of Shibuya move with him. Not like a parade before a king, but like a street, making room for a stretcher. People funnel, doors open, tape holds. The wound in his forearm murmurs cruelty, and he answers with small tasks until it tires. Kenjaku's second play announces itself without spectacle. The vending machines die in unison. The lights accept darkness politely and then refuse to come back. Phones buzz with the same message in different skins. Shelter here. The maps on their screens redraw to guide survivors into a cul-de-sac that wasn't on any floor plan. Ichichi swears, almost religious, and throws a different corridor onto the monitors with a pen and a point. He's hijacking the signage, he says. Do not let anyone follow blue arrows. Follow my voice. Mahito purrs somewhere above them, loving how symbols betray their owners at the right angle. Yogo stalks the sublevels, smelling for fuel, wanting a cathedral to burn because there isn't one. The Emperor feels the force corridor tug at the crowd like gravity. He walks into its mouth and takes the meaning out with his hands the way you take a nail out of a child's shoe. The signage goes from insistence to suggestion. The crowd hesitates, then obeys voice of a picture, Tonight, that is an education. The engine that wanted screams reconfigures. It no longer needs thresholds. It asks for a sum of gestures, shrugs, closed doors, eyes averted. It feeds on permission. He tastes the change with disgust that respects the engineer. Vision is coming. The wound whispers like frost on a window. Take the offer, it suggests kindly. He doesn't answer it. He re-enters the platform that remembers cuts and stands where the rails arc like taut string. Utahime sets her anchors low and simple. Nanami positions where math will matter most. Gakuganji places his staff like a fuse no one should light. The air loses its warmth without cooling. Sound distances itself. The floor's grid returns, faint. The city's little fox shrine rings again, windless. The ring pulls his mind sideways in a way that isn't compulsion, just invitation. He steps half an inch into a space that touches all seconds at once. 3 doors hang in the air as clean as arguments. The first door opens onto Terra's light. The choir grows fat and easy. His projection drinks without guilt. Shibuya returns to itself with the efficiency of a dream concluding. The price shows up in footnotes. Memories bleed at the edges for anyone who stood near him tonight. The fox mask becomes a paper with no face. Urahime wakes with ink on her hands and cannot remember a vow. Nanami nods at the coin and doesn't know why he keeps it. The council writes a policy that looks good aloud, then weaponizes it. In a week, this city stops believing it can save itself. In a year, it forgets it tried. The second door opens onto a night with no gate behind it. He is a free agent. He walks alleys, burns engines, hacks rituals, writes new signs the way you write braille into bruises. He starts a schism he can't finish. Gakuganji hunts him with rules that would be right if the enemy were smaller. Utahime loses standing to protect him. Nanami dies where math held too long without backup. Tokyo learns to say his name and lights incense to a stranger. In 10 years, sorcerers fight less night, bleed more day. He is praised for a generation and hated for 2. The third door is less door and more harness. He sees himself seated in the city's logistics like a spine with hands. His radiance is a ledger, his oath a street law, his banner a paper tag, not cloth. He runs on signatures, not sacrifice. He never saves as many in a minute as his appetite promises. He saves more in a year than any appetite ever did. The cost is continuous humiliation, asking permission, accepting refusal, explaining limits to men who want miracles and to men who hate them. He will be called a servant and hear it as an honor until it becomes a bruise he massages so he can lift his arm. The doors close. He's back on tile. No time has passed. His chest is heavier and lighter. Choose, the wound says. A friend pretending to be helpful. Nanami's radio whispers in a voice that belongs to a paramedic who will probably never have therapy, but deserves it. We need the corridor to med. And the request is a prayer, because real prayers ask for things you can do. He answers the only way that keeps him honest. Sanctioned, he says to the air, to himself, to the throne behind him and the city in front. I choose leash. Something in the field eases. Kenjaku's next needle pierces deeper, because it always does when you choose the path that preserves other people's power. Mahito laughs with pity, because he respects cruelty and hates anything that looks like discipline. The choice arrives in flesh. The southern stairwell block groans. Jogo, finally pleased with a tank marked with hazard diamonds and a wind more stubborn than his own breath, lights it and tips it. Fire muscles upward like a thing freed from scale. The exhaust channels lean to help the flame grow because they were built by men who loved efficiency. Utahime swears into the ether. If that fuel cooks in the shaft, we lose this entire axis. We can vent, Ichichi says, voice knotted. But it blows smoke into residency above ground. Then we vent and we put wet cloth over mouths, Nanami says immediately. And we call the fire crews and we tell them to break laws. On it, Ichichi says. He is in love with competence and will marry it if paperwork allows. The Emperor moves not toward the fire and not away. He takes the corridor itself by its shoulders the way you steady a panicking friend. He narrows it, widens it, shifts eddies of human motion, so the slow stand on shoulders of the fast and the fast accept it willingly. He steps into the shaft and uses his body as a baffle. He does not command flame. He gives it something to prefer that doesn't involve lungs. Fire is vain. It accepts the compliment of a different path. Mahito sees a boy crouched by a stairwell alone because his father carried his sister and said, "Wait." He reaches. Yuji is there. He has no technique that fixes souls. He has fists that do. He hits Mahito in the only way that counts, in the second before contact. It isn't elegant. It is sufficient. Mahito's grin slides off and crawls back on. Gakuganji and two juniors lay a lethal curtain a block north to catch curses that flee the heat into a pediatric ward. Utahime writes over it with a mirror of the Emperor's vow, her scrawl uglier and better. The curtain hisses, then holds, complains only to those who intend harm. Jogo arrives at the top of the shaft through his own smoke, triumphant with an arsonist doctrine. The Emperor meets him with a hand that tells heat, up, not out. Jogo flinches at the insult physics pays him and finds a new target, a bus lot. He doesn't make it. A fire crew in yellow and courage intercepts with foam and a lie about how much it will do. It does enough. The last wave hits like weather finding a gap. Kenjaku's rug pulls toward a new center, a temporary shelter crammed into a high school gym where every sigil is tape and intention. The false signs now point there. The rumor reads, that's where the help is, and people will go where help is even if the letters look wrong. The gym's doors become teeth. No icon has learned to wear a helpful face. It sits over the threshold like a news article that quotes no witnesses and still convinces. The Emperor stops at the far end of the basketball court and feels his symbol stutter. He does not ask the room to love him. He asks the room to love itself. Nanami, he says, authorization. Nanami checks the coin and the faces and the fact that he is tired and still sharp. Authorized, he says. Bound to the following. Not one human breath lost to your hand. Our practitioners sign every alteration. You obey the boring as if it were sacred. I will obey the boring, the Emperor says, straight-faced. And Utahime snorts because humor is a way to consecrate discipline. They work the gym like a machine they built in a shed. Utahime writes mundane wards on tape and sticks them at shin height like a mother's hand. People step over them, and no icon has to bend down to eat and finds it beneath its brand. Nanami marks lanes with chalk and math. Jogo's scattered heat eddies hit the chalk and lose coherence. Ichichi pipes recorded instructions through a speaker in a janitor's cart. The instructions sound like a calm aunt on the phone, and the crowd's heart rate drops. The Emperor keeps his hands on doors and rails and carts. He doesn't glow. He doesn't preach. He catches no icon's edges on steel, not symbol, and drags it like a reluctant customer to the register where his vow awaits payment. The whole pays in time. Time is currency richer than power tonight. Kenjaku tests one last lever, the boy. He's a trigger, the whisper says in 100 paws. You could end the culling game before it starts. You could kill a king in a cradle. The Emperor looks at Yuji. He sees dirt on a kid's cheek and all the weight behind his eyes. He sees a hand on a rail steadying someone else before himself. He sees a shrine in a rib cage. He says the line out loud because vows should be heard by people, not just gods. "This boy will not die by my hand under this sky," he declares, "and no plan that requires it will use my name." Sukuna listens like a wolf under a house listens to boots. He laughs, dangerous and almost affectionate. "You keep closing doors I want open," he purrs. "Be interesting when you're forced to open one." "Be less," Yuji mutters, and clamps down on the laugh inside him with human teeth. It does not stop. It notices. They finish not with a crescendo, but with drains ridding themselves of clogs. The curtains go thin. The false signs lose fonts. The gym exhales. The night shifts from acute to aftermath. Hyogo burns into a sulk. Mahito flees to write a new thesis on the back of a child's terror and finds the child asleep and cannot use it. Kenjaku presses his fingers together in a little prayer that is not to any god, just to the elegance of data, and files a report titled "Unknown Willing to Accept Sanction." They gather at the van because they need walls and a surface to put elbows on. Utahime peels tape off her fingers with the satisfaction of a craftsperson done for the minute. Nanami checks his suit for blood that isn't his. Gakuganji stares at nothing in particular and thinks about a rule he loved, that maybe loved him back only when he was young. The Emperor stands outside and watches the city count itself. He feels the thrones draw like a tide against his ankles and does not step back. He opens his hand. On his palm, the aquila is two thin lines again. Between them sits a small, almost invisible mark, a square turned 45 degrees, a barrier diagram, the sign Utahime draws in her sleep when the world needs to be told no. It is not pretty, it is faithful. "Boundaries," Nanami says, softly formal, because this is how you write a compact and make it hold. The Emperor speaks the clause like writing on a door everyone can see. "I act as custodian of corridors," he says. "I move bodies and meaning, not law. I take signatures from practitioners for changes to rites. I defer to proximate human will, sorcerers on scene, then civil authority, then the crowd's nerve. My lethal force against humans is dead. Against curses, I come as physics first. My far draw is throttled. If I reach too far, I become dull before I become cruel." Utahime listens and nods where a general would nod. "Add, you never requisition a human you can conscript a building to do instead." "Added," he says, amused at the decency hidden in that cruelty. Gakuganji clears his throat. A formal prelude to conceding a piece of ground he'll ask back later. "Add, Jujutsu High Oversight reassigns you when doctrine outweighs sentiment, and you accept the reassignment unless it kills civilians to obey." "Added," he says, and the old man blinks at how painlessly the bandage stuck. Nanami takes out the coin. He closes his hand around it and says what he never thought he would say to a man who calls himself Emperor. "I'll hold your leash," he offers, without pride or insult. "When I say heal, you heal." "I will heal," the Emperor answers, and the sound is not a king broken. It is a soldier relieved. They seal it with signatures that are not written because the city pays attention when people stand this close and say rules aloud. The mandate settles like a jacket stitched from ugly cloth that warms anyway. The purge happens in reverse of spectacle. It is not fire leaving. It is exits reopening and shoes moving of their own accord. It is the sound of a distant bus tester returning to its schedule. No icon ends as politely as an editorial correction buried under an ad. The wound in his forearm quiets, not forgiven, but on probation. The symbol on his chest does not return with a shine. It returns with a job. He walks the line one last time. He stops at the fox mask. The little girl wakes, sees him, and smiles without fear, as if somewhere in her brain she made a file titled "This Night" and put in it a hand picking up a mask and a building making room. "Thank you," her mother says, still embarrassed to use small words for large relief. You saved each other, he answers, because he will not own what isn't his. He faces the ruined station and the not ruined city. He looks like a man relieved to have a supervisor and a task list. It suits him. The reaction rolls outward through factions that wake at the smell of new law. In a council chamber where portraits sag under their own opinions, a vote passes to classify the unknown as sanctioned projection. Tokyo Protocol. In a shrine office run by women who have learned to run men gently, a note is made to change the route of the next festival so that it passes the fox shrine that rang. In the dormitories at Jujutsu High, a kid pulls a blanket over his head and whispers a new prayer to nobody in particular. Please make the boring strong. Kenjaku turns off his screens and closes his eyes and watches a path tree where the branches labeled mass casualty elegantly converge and sighs because he prefers clean graphs. He writes a new variable into the culling game. Leash length. Mahito sits on a swing in a small park and drags his toes in gravel and plans a more personal cruelty. We'll make him choose a person one day, he tells the empty slide, smiling. He'll put his rule on a scale and we'll see if it breaks his wrist or a neck. Sukuna leans on the bars in Yuji's chest and hums an old tune. He recognizes a rival who won't copy him and won't bore him. He decides to let the boy live because limits make meals more interesting when you break them. Eat your vegetables, he advises with mock kindness. You'll need them. Jogo finds a quiet alley and ignites trash he can bully. He tells himself a story where tonight was a rehearsal for a larger fire. He believes it enough to sleep. Gojo is gone, an absence with weight. The cube containing him sits somewhere patient. The world tilts to keep him in mind and out of hand. The emperor waits in the street and does not vanish. He refuses the easy return because he is now on a clock and must set a precedent early. He will leave later, after signatures turn into habit. He watches a fire crew roll hose with that tired joy. Only people who have done a job know. He nods at a police officer who broke a rule and saved a grandmother and will write the rule better tomorrow. He looks at Nanami, who looks back, and they share the relief of men who hate worship and prefer checklists. Utahime leans on a van and texts nothing to nobody, because some moments do not need records. Gakuganji stands at the edge of a crowd that didn't need him and chooses not to resent it. The night becomes dawn in a way that insults poets, slowly, with trash trucks. The rain resolves into drizzle. Shibuya learns a ritual. Leave bottled tea on that low wall. Light a candle at the fox shrine. Pick up a piece of tile and set it on a stack, because stacks become repairs if you respect them long enough. He doesn't give a speech. He walks to the van where Ichichi has been awake for an age and puts his hand on the roof like a benediction with no religion attached. You did it, he says. Ichichi laughs once, too loud, and wipes his eyes. We did enough, he says, which is a holy sentence in a world that punishes perfectionists. The emperor turns toward the sky at last, because he owes his choir rest he hasn't given. He will leave a network of nudges, not a statue. He will leave a rule, not a roadblock. He will leave his symbol not on a banner, but on a sticker affixed to a steel door at shin height that says, in perfectly boring font, Exit. He will leave a man named Nanami with a coin and a right. He will leave Utahime with a mandate she can throw in an old man's face and win. He will leave Gakuganji with the memory of being relieved and not hating it. He will take with him the smell of wet iron and cheap incense, the sound of a fox shrine ringing for nobody and everybody, the face of a child in a mask, and a cut that will keep him honest when the next city thinks it wants a god. A woman in a convenience store across the street from the station, Opens early because customers need comfort at stupid hours. She puts out onigiri, an instant miso, and a tip jar that says for the cruise with an emoji that looks like a battle standard. She looks up when the door chime rings and sees nothing much. Tired people, a man in a suit paying for 5 drinks, a teenager counting change twice. She does not see the golden figure pass. She sees a reflection of light on a wet road and decides it is good. He steps sideways and is gone, not like a light flicked, but like a hand withdrawn because the child can now cross alone. The camera pulls up over Shibuya, as if the city wanted to show you its crown. The lights shape a sigil not engineered but emergent. 2 thin lines that nearly meet and a small rotated square between them, taped to a night that chose to live. Beyond, the planet curves. Beyond that, far away, a star brightens by habit and love and ledger. The habit gets better tonight. The ledger learns a new column. Mercy first. In a home in Narima, a grandmother who doesn't usually like leaving candles lit does so without worrying she will be judged for superstition. In an office in Chiyoda, a bureaucrat writes a draft memo that replaces lethal curtain defaults with targeted scrub language because a woman swore at him on a radio and changed his mind. In a school in Setagaya, a child draws 2 birds badly and a little square that touches them and tells his teacher it's the sign for not dying. The fox shrine keeps ringing occasionally without a wind, as if the alley had learned when to speak up. The janitor who mopped the platform joins a union. The paramedic sleeps without an alarm and wakes to his own breathing, not panicking. The city remembers that competence is contagious. He sits again on a throne and hears the candles and feels the hands and opens his own to show the wound and the sticker. He is smaller. He is more dangerous in the way that matters. Sukuna hums like a threat under a floorboard and smiles at the prospect of a future argument. Kenjiku writes a new plan and names a variable after a leash. Mahito looks for a soul to bend and finds one too hard to enjoy and one too soft to bother, and consoles himself with an atrocity that will make sense in a paper. Jogo intends to burn a museum and trips over a child's chalk drawing on the sidewalk that looks like a sun and a sandwich and loses interest for 5 minutes that save a building. Shibuya goes to work. The corridors hold. The exits say what they mean. The boring becomes sacred because someone asked it to and meant it.